All right, what is up, everybody, and welcome to day 3 of TBRCon 2023 for another author reading. This one's a bit special because we're doing an anthology, but I'm joined today by L.L. MacRae and HL Tinsley. How are you both doing?
Good, thank you. You?
Yeah, thanks for joining me. And today we're going to be focusing on the Anatomy of Fear Kickstarter anthology, which TBRCon has been helping out with. We've been promoting a bit. The Kickstarter launched on Sunday, but Holly, if you could tell us a bit more about the project.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it's an anthology we've put together called The Anatomy of Fear, and it's 12 stories done by 12 indie authors, many names who people will recognise. I can see a few of them are actually watching right now, so hello to everybody. We have themed the anthology around the concept of fear and also of the anatomy. So the way we've approached it is that each author has selected a particular body part as the theme of their story. So, for example, Lauren has chosen bones, so we're going to hear a little bit of that. But each author has really kind of been given the freedom to really interpret the theme the way that they want to. So some of the stories are very literal horror, some of the stories cross over into dark fantasy and grimdark. They're all very unique, and it's been an absolute privilege to read them all as they've been coming in. So I'm really excited to see it all come together.
Oh, me too. And why was Kickstarter the platform that you wanted to use, like crowdfunding in general, as a way to do this anthology?
I mean, we looked at various avenues to go down, and we looked at just kind of putting it out ourselves. But what we wanted to do with the project was to really elevate it past the point of just being a collection of stories, which is Kickstarter obviously allows you to go a bit further and a bit wider with the things you can do. So we're looking at getting some exclusive artwork done, which is going to complement the stories. And we're also hoping, fingers crossed, that if we get past our initial target, we can look at other channels like audiobooks and hardbacks. And
Nice.
we also want to be able to offer a more exclusive limited version of the book as well. So for us, Kickstarter was a way to really be able to offer a wider variety on this project.
Right on. And also for TBRCon related stuff, there is a specific tier, backer tier, where you can get some really cool exclusive content like a TBRCon panel, secret panel, reading from Zamil Akhtar, a bunch of other stuff. But I think it's really cool. I've been hearing a lot more from authors about Kickstarter lately, and just the avenues of possibility that it opens up. I've been talking to, Jed Hearn and Dirk Ashton and some of the folks who used to do Wizards, Wars, and Words about Kickstarter and the value that it has. Lauren, I want to get your take in terms of how you came to be a part of this project, but also how you feel about things like crowdfunding and Kickstarter.
So Holly is basically the head of the project. She is our surrogate mother. We go to her for all of our stories, and she looks after us and, does most of the legwork, to be fair. So she approached me. I presume she approached other authors as well. I know she's working very closely with P.L. Stewart on this. So presumably she wanted me to be part of this project, which was really lovely. It's really nice to be part of something with multiple authors because, you get to read other stories. You get to, look at your own writing in a different way. So when she approached me about this dark fantasy horror anthology, my immediate thought was, I'm not sure that I could do that. For anyone that's read any of my stuff, it's very lighthearted, fun, adventurous, whimsical, even, despite being adult fantasy. And she's like, well, just, it's open to interpretation, as Holly said. There's lots of different ways to approach it. So I had a read of the brief, and I, liked the idea of the theme. I liked the idea that it was going to be crowdfunded. I liked, just being involved with this kind of project. So, waited for light bulb moments, started drafting and put together a short story. And I think the collaborative style of this has been really helpful. Because you get to read other people, you get ideas, you get feedback. So we all kind of know what's going on in each other's stories. And that really helped me dive into a side of myself that perhaps I hadn't really explored before. And was kind of cathartic in the same way.
That's awesome. Just very quick aside, RJ Bailey's in the chat, and he says hello to both of you.
Hi, RJ.
Honored to work with exceedingly talented authors.
Oh.
Lauren, as well, I'm curious for you. You brought up the theme, so this idea of fear. Why was that? Was that something that appealed to you, or was that something that you found to be a little bit more challenging when you were approaching your short story?
I thought it was going to be harder than it was. Like I said, I tend to write a lot of escapist fantasy. The world is horrible. There's lots of fear in it, so I want to dive into something fun. But when you're writing a story about fear, for my characters, they're trying to escape that fear anyway. So the route is still kind of the same. Mm-hmm. It's just, it gives me leeway to go a bit darker than I normally would. It's not set in any of my existing worlds, so it's not like I'm going to be upsetting readers or anything. It was just go forth and be free and explore this idea. And I had a lot of fun with it. It was difficult, of course, because it's not my usual forte. But it was a really great way to explore why we fear things, what we fear, how we get around that, the effects it has on us psychologically, physically. Mm-hmm. And it was a really nice way of exploring writing in a way that I've never approached before.
That's awesome. And so the reading that you're doing today is your short story from the collection. How many authors are there in total, Holly, in this anthology?
12 authors in total.
Awesome. And do you want to list their names here so we can give them a bit of a shout out?
Okay, this is a challenge now. You think I would remember them all, but
mother, get on it.
I know the pressure. So obviously we've got L.L. MacRae, we have Trudy Skies, we have Kristen Nattar, we have Lee C. Connolly, we have Tim Hardy, we have Jacob Fanix, we have Brian Bellick, we have Sean Crow, we have myself. I can't remember who I've already said now. We have
Zamil Akhtar.
Yeah, he's there. We also have. Oh my gosh, this is a test. Bjorn Larson and one more. I can't remember how I already said. This is the problem.
Ryan Housey?
Ryan, yes, Ryan. How could I forget Ryan? I didn't forget you, Ryan. Sorry.
That's why I'm here. Yeah, a surrogate mother and surrogate father, whatever. And Lauren, so what you're going to be reading today is your short story, your contribution to the anthology. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it, and then I'll let you get right into it?
Sure. So it's not the whole thing. It is just an excerpt from the middle-ish. So it's not the very beginning. It's not the very end. So there will be a few things slightly out of context, but it was quite a nice descriptive bit. There are some things explored there, so I thought it would work for a reading. Plus, I always feel weird reading my own thing. And some of the more intense bits of my short story, I wasn't entirely sure I would be able to read out loud. So I decided to go for like a small lull, if that makes sense. That as Holly said, the body part that I chose was bones. The story is called The Bone Collector. And as I mentioned, it's not set in any of my previous worlds, so you don't need to know any of that. It's literally just a small village where some very dark things happen, sort of supernatural. There are like fell beasts outside. There are creatures that appear whenever, or they sort of manifest whenever something happens. And in this case, when bones break, this thing appears. And our main character is a young girl. She's about 5 or 6 years old. And it's kind of the things that she has to deal with, the fears that she has, and how she potentially overcomes those fears. So
awesome.
Thank you, Chris.
Is there a movie called The Bone Collector with Angelina Jolie?
I really hope not, because I was like, I'm sure this title has been used in anything before.
It's a great title. It's a great title.
It's a great film though, but yeah, I'm sure we'll be fine.
Yeah. No.
Well,
there's titles don't have copyright. Yeah.
But the reading is about 7 minutes. So do let me know if I go too fast, too slow. And I can always provide it later on if people want. So
no, it's all good. I will let you take it away.
Here we go. The Bone Collector, an excerpt. The white tree in the village's centre had always captured Lena's attention. It was a willow, a twisted thing of pale bark that grew alone. Nothing, not even grass, grew underneath the tree's drooping leaves and white branches. The village chief had always claimed it had powers due to the sorcerers who'd lived centuries before any houses had been built there. They'd touched the land with their magic, and now people could receive the tree's blessings: a safe birth, good hunting, the strength of an ox for a day. The stories claimed sorcery was also responsible for the abnormal creatures that roved the land and meant travelling was not safe, some remnant of their magic, uncontrolled and misunderstood, that still held power. Lena didn't know if all those stories were true, but the tree was real enough. She'd seen it cure fevers, remove the weeping sickness, and once reverse death for a lucky soul. The tree had always reminded her of the standing stones far to the north, made by some ancient and powerful people who left no clear reasoning for their structures. She loved playing among the gnarled roots, so thick they'd take 10 hands to fit around. The roots popped out of the dark soil like a sea monster from the old tales. Pale and dull, they reminded her of carcasses picked clean by crows. She'd watched the long leaves that draped along the ground and wondered what it would be like to sit and flow and be so carefree, to have a power that people coveted, to choose whether or not to bestow that. Lena had once stared at a hole in the trunk so hard that she could have sworn a pair of eyes stared right back at her. She'd kept away from the tree for a while after that. Lena adjusted her position, the wooden windowsill worn from sitting there so often over the years. Carefully, she pushed her arm through the open window. Cold rain splattered onto her hand, but the same pressure from the night before remained. Her chest tightened. She couldn't leave. Something was stopping her. Some instinctual fear, some terror of the unknown, or something greater. She let out a shaky breath and willed the bubbling panic to settle. She took what solace she could in the quiet morning that spilled into the cabin through murky windows. Even on the edge of the village, she could see the outline of the tree, a faint glow in the gloom. The rains might have been unpleasant, making her cold to her bones, but demons and night creatures avoided hunting nearby during the rainy season. There'd been talk that the summer droughts pushed the creatures to be bolder, to hunt people and attack in the dead of night. If her parents were travelling to another village, there was little chance of them being taken by one of the fell beasts while it rained. Lena wasn't sure how much time had passed, because when she next blinked, the sun had burned away most of the mist, the heavy rain slowing to a light drizzle, and several of the local children were playing in the grass outside the cabin. Most were her age, some a few years younger. She scanned the group, then slumped back in disappointment. Alyssa wasn't there. For a moment, she'd hoped her friend might have come to see her. The children were playing roughly, wrestling and jabbing each other with sticks, while laughing in delight as mud splattered across their skin and clothes. Lena longed to join them, and again tried to leave through the open window, but that pressure held her back, forcing the breath from her. It was a barrier she could not cross. Not wishing to see anything more, Lena clambered down from the sill. The bell tolled again, so high and faint she wasn't sure whether she'd imagined it. She froze, well practiced in keeping still, and listened. As she was about to dismiss it as an errant daydream, excuse me. As she was about to dismiss it as an errant daydream, a shadow darted across the open doorway to her parents' room. Swallowing a lump in her throat, Lena shuffled towards the door. Past the corner where she damaged the floor several summers ago, past the hole in the wall her father had made the previous rainy season, to the room's boundary. I'm so sorry. Lena peered in, unwilling to walk straight into a room that was often out of bounds, and looked for the shadow. There, in the motes of the pale light streaming in through the window, she saw it. She didn't know what it was. A shadow made living, a remnant of the sorcerer's magic from the village chief's stories, something hideous and unspeakable. She wondered why she'd never seen anything else like it before. No other manifestation of sickness, death, or blood, gods, there was always so much blood, ever appeared. It only manifested from bones, and only where they broke. It lingered half in, half out of the light, watching her expectantly. It held the skull bell as before, the fire within wavering as if caught in a breeze. They regarded each other for long seconds, the distant, muffled laughter of the children outside the only noise. She stayed in place, gathering her courage, ready to bolt at the tiniest sign of movement. Eventually, Lena said in a small voice, "What are you?" It did not reply for some time, and Lena took a hesitant step closer, crossing the threshold into the room, though she kept one hand on the doorframe for comfort. It stepped towards her, bird-like in its movements and colouring, a raven or magpie perhaps, with a twisted beak and a cloak of black feathers around its hunched shoulders. About the size of a large dog, barely tall enough to reach her shoulders, its limbs appeared covered not in skin or fur, but the scales of a lizard. Each scale was black as night, though the creature's pale head was in contrast to its body. There were two round, oozing blobs where its eyes should be, dark, like logs burned too long. Lena didn't think it could see out of those, yet her skin prickled. She was definitely being watched. Just as there are carrion feeders in this world, picking clean corpses, there are vultures in the world beyond. I am one such entity. Lena wanted to flinch at its voice, thick with rust. She hesitated where she stood. Was it a dream? It had to be. What it said didn't make any sense. Why can I see you? It tilted its head. You seek my power. Lena frowned, her eyebrows furrowing deeply as she thought. I don't understand. I don't know what you are. Its feathers rustled. You're curious. Lena didn't know how to react. She was so used to second-guessing what her father expected that she found herself utterly at a loss for how to speak with this creature. What did it want? What was the right thing to say? It spoke of power. Could it hurt her if she messed up? Lena stumbled backwards, suddenly wanting to get away from the unknown. If her parents returned, if they caught her where she wasn't supposed to be, doing what she wasn't supposed to do. It spread its arms, feathers erupting from the scales, and engulfed the room in shadow. Lena yelped in fright and squeezed her eyes shut. She didn't want this. She kept them closed as long as she could, until the light patter of rain on the window disappeared, replaced by gentle warmth. Carefully, slowly, Lena peered out of one eye. Her mouth fell open in unrestrained shock. They stood outside, a warm sun chasing away any thoughts of rain. Lena was still barefoot and in her nightgown, and the grass between her toes tickled. She giggled, crouching and picking at a few blades. Dandelions blew away in the breeze, pulled free by her fingers. Her heart was full of the simple joy of watching dandelion fluff soar in the sky, and she wondered where it would go, what it would see before it landed somewhere new. There were more dandelions in the grass, and she happily bounded between them, picking them and throwing them to the wind. When she spun around to look for more, her laughter abruptly stopped. It was there, sitting on one of the exposed roots underneath the white tree, watching her. She stumbled back and looked around. The white tree was in the heart of the village, but there were no buildings here, only fields and fields of grass and flowers in all directions. Where are we? You don't recognize this place? It tilted its head this way and that. I know the tree, but then you know where you stand. Is this a dream? The flame in the skull bell blazed, shifting from orange to blue. Far from it. And that is the excerpt. Thank you. I'm so sorry about that.
It's all good. You did an amazing job.
Thank you.
And multiple comments. RJ commended you on your lovely voice.
Oh, Joe, you're too kind.
When you sent a pronunciation guide for Iron Crown, his wife commented on your lovely voice. So.
Oh, thank you.
And Terry Rudge says that he can already feel the suspense and tension that will be in this story, and I agree. You very much captured this fear. But I wanted to get your opinion on this, but also Trudy in the comments. Hi, Trudy. She asked, why did you pick bones as your part of the anatomy?
Because I didn't want to go for proper body horror. And I thought bones could be sort of vague enough and linked to fantasy and power in some way that I could potentially tackle without too much difficulty. That was literally the only reason. And nobody else had picked it. So, yeah.
Holly, I'm curious from your perspective, what was it like in terms of everybody picking the different anatomy, the different anatomical parts, and you know, if from your perspective you feel like, yeah, this really fits you and your personality or your writing style or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel it was really very democratic. I was expecting there to be fights and arguments and, you know, battles to the death and things, but everyone was actually really quite generous and good about it. So I think most people picked their preferred body part within maybe the first 24 hours of us all coming together.
Wow.
There were a few people that picked the same, but then people were really good about saying, well, if you have that, I'll do this, and changing. So I think for somebody, as mentioned, this is kind of their first foray into doing something that is horror based. So I think, for example, there's I think Trudy picked Blood, which I think felt more like it could cross over between fantasy and horror to make it more of a mixed genre. And then kind of you've got people like Lee who are really very rooted and experienced in horror, and he went for eyes because, you know, eyeballs are gross and people like that. So I think everyone was happy with what they ended up with. So.
Oh, that's awesome. And Trudy asks again, were you inspired by other anthologies? You know, have either of you worked on other anthologies, and what did you learn from them or take away from them? And Holly, in your case as well, learning from other people's Kickstarter projects.
I mean, for me, I initially got involved with this because PL Stewart approached me with an idea to do a collaborative project, and I kind of got on board and was initially supposed to be more of an assistant, but it kind of ended up with the roles reversing, so I ended up kind of taking it on. So I've actually never done a Kickstarter before. This is fully a learning process for me in terms of the crowdfunding side. In terms of the anthology side, I had literally just come off the back of doing another anthology, which Lee C. Connolly was also involved in. So I did learn a bit about the process of putting it together through that. But even then, a lot of this is me just really learning as I go and trying to convince all the rest of the authors that I know what I'm doing when I probably don't. And so far it's worked.
The illusion of a responsible surrogate mother.
This is it.
That kind of ties perfectly into Jamidy's question. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. How did you gather the lineup of authors for the anthology? You mentioned you already worked with Lee C. Connolly on one, and P.L. Stewart, who does the foreword for the anthology, approached you initially. But what was it like getting all the other authors involved? Lauren mentioned how she got approached beforehand, but how was that process like for you?
I mean, that was completely crazy to me because myself and PL, we worked together on a list of authors. And I think initially we had about 20 names that we thought would be good for this anthology. So some of the authors I knew already, some of the authors I knew through doing SBFBO, some were just authors that I really admired and wanted to work with. So we had this list. I think we had discussions where we were like, you know, maybe we'll get 3 or 4 yeses, you know, and then we'll have to just keep going through the list till we get enough. And the first 12 people that we approached, like, yes, just straight away, 100%, you know. And I kind of thought it was going to be a really laborious process, and it was really easy. So, I mean, that was great. And I think we had a group established probably within about a week of us going, should we do an anthology? Yeah. And then it kind of just grew legs and went from there.
That's brilliant. You probably had such an easy time compared to like what I had to do for TBRCon. It's like everyone's just like, yes, yes, yes. Very simple.
Yeah.
I love that though. Terry asks, have any of the authors wanted to expand their short stories out into a full-length novel or into further projects? Lauren, I'll get your take in terms of how you're feeling about the Bone Collector and if you would like to extend that further. And then Holly, after that, if you've heard of any of the other authors mention that they want to do something. I think Crystal wrote her story as a side story within her Tainted Dominion series, but Lauren, I'll get your take on that first.
The idea hadn't occurred to me, in all honesty. It was written very quickly as a short story. Which is kind of good but kind of bad because I hadn't given much more thought to the world or an overarching plot, which is something that I would definitely need to do if it was a full-length novel. A short story can really just be a concept expanded slightly, and it kind of works. You don't need to, you know, worry too much about rigorous plotting out. So probably not, but I like the idea of maybe doing more short stories, you know, themed similarly. So kind of yes, but not specifically.
Yeah. And Holly, have you heard of any of the authors mentioning that they're going to expand based on their short stories, or if any of them wrote, aside from Crystal, short stories based in an already existing universe?
As far as I know, all of the stories are pretty much originals. I do know that Tim Hardy has used a world that he is using in other projects. So I don't want to kind of give false details or say something wrong, but I believe that is a project that he's going to be working on in the near future, and that's going to expand out into a full-length novel. But I'm sure if people ask him, he'll tell you all about it.
Yeah, and Trudy in the comments said, I considered using my own world to create a side story within it, but decided it would be too complicated to explain Chime and the domains in a short story. So
Yeah.
All right, well, we will close out with this question from RJ. This is a two-parter. Do you both love horror in general? And if so, why? And after that, you can tell everybody some of your favorite horror movies and or books. So Lauren, we'll go with you first.
I don't like horror, which is really weird. One of the stories that I read in this anthology actually gave me a nightmare, and I stopped reading halfway through because it affected me that much. I don't like it. That being said, I think the original Jurassic Park is considered a horror, and I love that. It's one of my top 10 all-time favorite films. So if you count Jurassic Park, that's my favorite horror. But normally I'm much too much of a wimp and a coward to enjoy the genre. Hats off to everybody for whom it's their bread and butter, but not for me.
And Holly, what about you?
I mean, my son is currently studying to become a film producer, and he wants to work in horror. So I don't really get a choice about whether I want to be involved in horror or not. I hear about it constantly. I mean, in terms of my own personal preference, I used to really like classic horror, kind of your Draculas and Frankensteins and all that kind of Hammer horror. More recently, though, and I apologize because I'm going to butcher this name, but I really love Guillermo del Toro, who did Pan's Labyrinth. He also does a lot of graphic novel work and books and things. And his whole thing is about like monsters and creatures and kind of defying expectation of the body. So part of the inspiration for why I chose the body theme was because of my admiration for his body of work. And I think, again, it's that crossover between horror and dark fantasy that, you know, I really enjoy.
That's awesome. Yeah, you pronounced it well. You even had like a little like Guillermo del Toro. But yeah, I love his work too. For me personally, there's one actor who does a lot of the he was Pan in Pan's Labyrinth. He was in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. He's a super tall, lanky dude, but he just like captures these roles and the physicality of it really well. So it's cool to hear that Michael McDonald was asking about sort of the idea for the anthology. So it's cool to hear that your inspiration kind of came from the physicality and the body work that is at play in a lot of Guillermo del Toro's work. So that's really cool. And Trudy says, Doug Jones. Thank you, RJ. He mentioned that in the comments. Yeah, Doug Jones is incredible. So incredible. Trudy says you're doing a cozy fantasy anthology next, right?
I am, and Trudy has just volunteered to be the captain of that ship. So, but yeah. I'm on board.
Trudy, you're surrogate mother for the cozy fantasy. You got this. Yeah. All right, we'll close out with one more. Michael McDonald again. Did it take you long to write your stories once you got on board with the project? For Lauren and Holly, when you were kind of thinking about your story in conjunction with doing the anthology, and how long? So sort of like how long did it take to write the stories? And did you have ideas in mind already? Lauren, you said that yours was, you know, kind of this idea that just kind of came to you. But do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it started with the concept of, you know, something to do with bones breaking, you know, like, is there power in, you know, there's power in blood, there's power in bones, there must be power in the breaking of it. And what if that could be harnessed? And it just kind of starts as a seed like that for me. Same with all of my full length novels. It's mostly just a concept and it gets fleshed out a bit. And then obviously to link it into not just being a story about bones, it has to be an exploration of fear. So I looked at the kind of things that I fear and what I could put a character through and kind of linking it back with childhood fears and experiences. And that's kind of where the root of the story grew. As far as time, it took me longer than I thought it would because it's a complete story in like 5,000 to 10,000 words. But I would probably say about a month, but, you know, it goes through revisions and tweaks and people get feedback and things like that. But the initial draft, probably about a month on and off before I was like, right, I've now reached an end point.
Yeah, and at the same time, you're writing the sequel in your fantasy series at the same time. So
yeah,
juggling that stuff. Holly, what about you?
I will be totally honest. I cheated because P.L. Stewart approached me and said, "Would you be interested in writing something for a horror anthology?" And I said, "Well, do you know what? I've actually just finished a horror story that I was going to try and ship out to some magazines. So I essentially just reworked what I'd already got." So, you know, I kind of took the lazy route, but then I was like, I have to do all the admin and the back. So for me, I wanted to use something that I already knew was going to fit. So, and to be fair, even that wasn't so as bad as Brian Bellick. I think he wrote his first draft in about 6 hours. It was like I sent him an email saying, "Do you want to be in this anthology?" And the next morning he was like, "Here's a story."
Insane. Amazing. Trudy's saying call up Quenby because she doesn't want to take responsibility for Cozy Fantasy. Buck up, Trudy. Do it. All right. Well, we'll wrap things up there. I've included the link for the Kickstarter in the description below in the YouTube video. So please, if you listen to this, you like Lauren's story, you like everything that you're hearing, go back to Kickstarter now. We've also been promoting it during TBRCon week and we'll continue to do so. Holly, can you let people know where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter. So my handle on Twitter is @HollyTinsley, and the E in Tinsley is a 3. So I'll be posting up all the updates and all the info about the Kickstarter and how it's all going. And while I'm talking, I do just want to take a second to say thank you to everyone who has already supported us, and also to all of you guys at TBRCon as well for your amazing support. It's been so great to work with you and have your backing. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, we got your back always. Don't worry. And Lauren, where can people find you?
So my website is just llmacrae.com. All of my social links are on there. I'm on Twitter until it implodes and Instagram. And you'll find me in various Discords as well. So yeah, you'll see me around.
Awesome. And that cover, once again, is The Anatomy of Fear, an amazing anthology that I'm very, very excited to read. Some amazing authors taking part. And yeah, thank you both for taking the time to do this today, and thank you to everyone in the comments for hanging out with us and asking some great questions. And yeah, to anyone out there watching, listening, I hope you go back the Kickstarter for The Anatomy of Fear, and I'm very excited to see how things progress with this. So thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.